shrouded in honor at 3 inches in size. Here's your look at the new Hiya Toys G.I. Joe Exquisite Mini Storm Shadow. Exquisite Mini is a new standard setting series for 1/18 scale, featuring super articulation action figures from Hiya Toys. Just before we see if Storm Shadow switches sides, let's grab the tape measure first to see how tall the figure stands. While I'm also doing this as well, I'd like to thank the folks over at Hiya Toys that did make this review possible by sending not only the Snake Eyes that we looked at in the earlier review, but the Storm Shadow that we're looking at in this review. Storm Shadow stands at 3 3/4 inches in height, or the figure is going to be about 9.5 centimeters tall. Mentioned already, but I'll mention it again. We've already had a look at one other Hiya Toys G.I. Joe Exquisite Mini, that being Snake Eyes. So let's bring him in right now for comparisons. In this case, I might say that Snake Eyes is a tad bit taller than Storm Shadow, but not by much. Like with Snake Eyes, though, Storm Shadow comes included with the same rectangular display stand that has still the placement of the slots located on the bottom, so you can take more than one of these and connect them together, which we'll do more in a moment. The terrain sort of has, I guess you could say, a muddy or a sandy desert terrain that does have what seems almost to be like little bullet casings, broken glass, and all the things that would be left behind after a big battle. To come along with that, you get yourself the eye brackets, of course. That's always the case when it comes to these Exquisite Minis. The eye brackets just fit then in the provided slots here, 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 and here. And then you can take yourself the other display stand, just happen to have readily available here from Snake Eyes. And then you just line the two up together and you plug them together just like that. You really don't always need 2 eye brackets either. One is sometimes more than enough and you get yourself a larger terrain. Now just imagine, if you will, close your eyes if you will, if we have more than one of these, more than 2 of these, I don't know how many of these the Hiya Toys are planning to do for G.I. Joe, but let's just say for the sake of it that they're probably planning to do, I don't know, 15 figures. Just imagine how big the terrain would be eventually when it's all said and done. It's like the fact that you can't lock these like this. Let's move that to the side and get another closer look at some of the other details and the accessories that come included with this version of Storm Shadow. This version of Storm Shadow, though, is a little bit of a departure than what I'm used to seeing when it comes to Storm. He does, of course, come with the hood, so if you wanted to have him align more with G.I. Joe, even overlooking the fact he does still have the Cobra logo on the front of his chest, you can also do that as well. I don't want to get ahead of myself, though. Let's first have a look at the other things that figure comes included with. Like, for example, if you did want to have the option to swap out his hands. Whoops, just dropped them. The figure does have gripping hands. The hands themselves, just to go quickly look at those, the amount of paint that they put just to the top of the palm, I really like this silver metal finish that they added. On the bottom of it, though, you can also see, more in the thumb area than anything else, he has this really nice, very dark pink metallic finish also added there as well. That's something that will also carry over to the figure when we get to looking at him in a moment. The figure also comes included with a pair of katanas. They're sheathed parallel to one another, and they're sort of attached onto this rack that on the back of it does have a peg that then fits onto the figure's body. You can, though, strangely remove them. I'm not sure why you would want to really remove the sheaths, but you can. You just slide them up, and I think you can take them all off. They seem to hit, I see. They seem to hit one section of the katana, this back section right here, where you can't take them off completely. I guess you probably could pry them this way. So you could do it this way and just remove them that way. But I don't know if I would want to, and nor do I really wonder why they would even have given you the option to remove them in the first place. I mean, I guess it makes sense if you only wanted to have one katana, but considering that they have to be both attached to this rack anyways in order to fit onto the back of the figure's body, to remove only one will then just leave a slot behind where you know something belonged there in the first place. Each one of them, by the way, do have removable swords. The swords themselves have blades kind of in more of a dark gunmetal gray, and both of them actually are removable. So you do have that. Of course, you can take the swords and fit them into Storm Shadow's hands, or again, you can also take the dual sheaths and fit them on the back of his body. In this case, you always have to line up the bandolier to the hole provided on the back of the figure's torso, and then you just, once lined up, you fit the two together, and you just attach the sheath onto the back of Storm Shadow's body. The couple of times I have done this, I've popped the figure's head sculpt off, is you actually have to remove the head in order to remove the folded down hood piece in order, of course, to swap it out for the hood instead. We'll do that also more in a second. The figure also comes included with a bow. The bow is nice to see, actually does have a real working thread to the back. So again, you can have that holstered and held, I should say, in the figure's hands, and maybe even have the other hand drawn back, pulling back the bow about to fire off the arrow. Speaking of arrows, the figure also comes included with a silver quiver. The quiver contains 3 arrows. All 3 of them are removable. And you can see as well that they have painted the ends of the arrows as well as the feather on the other side. These fit pretty well together. I don't feel like I'm having to fight or ram, fit quarters in there in order to get all 3 arrows actually into the top of the quiver. They all seem to hold in there pretty good. Not to the point, I wouldn't want to tip these upside down for the risk that I may lose these all over the place. But again, you've got a little peg on the back of that, and that will then just fit onto the back of the torso of Storm Shadow. The last thing that we'll look at when it comes to the figure is the fact that he comes included with his hood. Generally, again, when I think of the hood, I tend to think of the G.I. Joe version of Storm Shadow, the only Storm Shadow I ever had as a kid. I never had the original one. If you did want to accomplish this look, what's first required is you have to remove the head. Let's just move this eye bracket out of the way. First, you want to take off, obviously, the rack that holds the 2 sheets of swords. Let's just put those to the side. And then first, I guess what we will do is we'll look at the defaulted head before we actually start taking things off. Mainly, more so, is the fact that the neck and the head are one piece. Now, this version of Storm Shadow is a bit of a departure than what I'm used to seeing. Storm Shadow, when I'm always thinking Storm Shadow, I tend to think of him just with a full white mask. Nothing with the included added bit of silver. The silver, actually, I have to say, does work quite well for the character, even though it's not what I'm usually thinking of when I think of the character itself. Now, this one does have, again, like the hood on the back here. That's just separately a separate loose piece of plastic. In order to remove that, I guess just before we do that, I want to spin this around all the way around so you guys can see the paintwork that they put into this piece. It's still, to be fair, a 3 3/4 inch scale. So it's something that Hasbro still continues to do when it comes to their G.I. Joe. Something that really did perplex me when we looked at Snake Eyes. The fact that another company was essentially doing not a scaled down, not a scaled up, but literally the exact same size of figure, the exact same articulation to some extent, and the same types of accessories. I feel like, unlike Snake Eyes, which we can actually bring in right now, Snake Eyes feels and looks more like a figure that I would expect to see from Hasbro, obviously enough. Storm Shadow, though, looks a little bit different, and enough that I feel like it could be another company that's approaching this line. Both of them do look really good together, though. One thing I really also like about Storm Shadow is not just the fact that his mask is a little bit different by adding the additional silver, but he also seems to have, from what I can gather, to be tattoos. He has them all the way down his arm here. Except for the part, of course, he has the silver guard down below. But, I mean, everything else, this is a really neat effect and something that I'm not used to seeing Storm Shadow ever really having. I can't really quite make out exactly what's all on here. It looks to be like serpent tails. Part of this almost even looks like a squid, but I would imagine it's just more like abstract than anything else. I really like that. He doesn't seem to have it anywhere here on the other arm, though, but I do think that this is a nice little touch by including that on Storm Shadow's body. He has the bandolier that has a couple of shurikens, none of which you can actually remove. He has the Cobra logo right there to tell you at least what associations he aligned himself with right now, until, of course, eventually he changes sides. He's got himself sort of a sash-like loincloth on the front of his body. I'm sure there's probably another name for that, some additional paint and work that they've added to the top of the belt. He also has it on the back with some really nice pattern work that they've actually sculpted to the plastic itself. Down below here, more traditional Storm Shadow, although he has, in this case, silver guards protecting his knees and his calves. To change out, at least not to the head, but actually the little hood piece on the back, what you have to do is you have to remove the head, but you have to remove the neck, as it is all one piece. Once that's off, carefully take the hood and put that to the side. Then what you'll want to do is you want to take Storm Shadow's head. It's actually easiest if you take Storm Shadow's head and you fit it from the front. Get that all the way in there as best as you can get it. And then without losing the bandolier in the process, we're just going to then take his neck and pop it back into place. Sometimes, though, while doing this, I've noticed that the hood tends to push the head further forward than really what I would want it. And sometimes also I find myself having to correct the head. If I don't have it, I feel, in the right place, I can also pop the head off and just move it back around. That's essentially what we get here with Storm Shadow. Although, to be fair, I don't have it 100% the way I really want it. You kind of have to kind of move the head. There we go. Do I have it right in the middle? Okay, we got it in the middle. And that's what Storm Shadow looks like with the hood now in place. To be honestly fair, it does look a little bit like it's clearly an extra piece. I know already that's an extra piece from the rest of the figure's body, but I think also because the way it lips up like this at the bottom, it doesn't really look like it belongs to the rest of the figure's body. but there's obviously that option available if you want. For the figure's articulation may involve me, in fact, having to remove the hood again. Just pop that off. Feed Storm Shadow's face back through, which not that hard, to be honest. Just going to remove that for right now. We'll bring back in maybe actually, I'll leave the hood off for right now. Pop the head back into place. The head is actually on a post, and the post does move around. So when you are putting the head back in place, sometimes the head does actually, well, the post itself for the ball joint shifts around a lot. For the articulation here for this new version of Storm Shadow, head is once again on a ball joint, so it does rotate all the way around. But again, I have to say, it's not so much the head. The head is part of the neck. So really, it's the neck that's doing all the work. The neck moves up, down, back, and forth. And yeah, you can rotate all the way around as well. Like the snake eyes we looked at before, making sure the head's all the way on there. Don't want to lose the head all of a sudden. The head I've noticed on mine is a little on the looser side. So just be careful that the head doesn't fall off and land on the floor somewhere. Shoulders rotate all the way around. And because of the way they hinge the elbow, the shoulders, I should say, you get about a 90-degree angle bend from that. The arms rotate at the bicep. You get yourself a double hinge on the elbow. And you get also the articulation with pegs for those wrists. So you can move them back and forth also as well. The upper torso is on a very generous ball joint. As well, it could be said for the bottom of his abdomen. That moves quite freely as well. Legs do split out. They seem to be on ball joints, so you can not quite do a full splits for say, Jean-Claude Van Damme for Storm Shadow here, but you can get about that much splits on Storm Shadow. You bring his legs forward, you can bring his legs back. It's a mild swivel, of course, at the top of the thigh. Figure has a double hinge on the knee. And then, like Snake Eyes we looked at before, his feet hinge up and down this way. And you can also rock him back and forth this way as well. I feel like with Storm Shadow, this is kind of where I feel maybe like Hiya Toys got a little more creative when it came to the design. I don't know necessarily if this Storm Shadow is based on a specific design in the comics, but I do like the idea that they gave something a little bit different to Storm Shadow, that he didn't look the same as what we're always used to seeing. Getting him just to stand here for a second. Hopefully he doesn't fall over. Here's what he again looks like with Snake Eyes. And where I feel like Snake Eyes just followed the basic blueprint of what Snake Eyes would always be. Storm Shadow took a bit of creative luxuries. Whether again that would be a design that Hasbro gave to Hiya Toys, or Hiya Toys just sort of ran with their own ideas. I like the mask. I like the silver that they've incorporated to the front of his face. I certainly like as well the tattoos they've given to the side of his arm. That gives not only a little bit of extra color to a character who's usually all clad in white, but it also brings a little more personality to the character as well. While I do like the look of Snake Eyes, I like the creative changes, though, that they've done with Storm Shadow here. Now that we've wrapped up things with both the exquisite minis of Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow, while I like Snake Eyes for just taking the classic approach, I welcome the idea that they went something different when it came to Storm Shadow's design. Now, I don't know, I would imagine a lot of this had something to do with Hasbro, probably telling Hiya well in advance, this is what we want our characters to look like, and they followed it to that. I can't imagine that they took many risks when it came to designing Storm Shadow, thinking outside the box, but they certainly have done that one way or another. Storm Shadow does have things slightly different than what I'm used to seeing with his classic look. From head to toe, mostly, he's classic-looking Storm Shadow, but then they incorporate some things like the faceplate mask, like the silver that he has on the front of his face, and more importantly, the tattoo work that he has all down one side of his body. Now, I don't know if it would actually stop at his shoulders, because you obviously can't take off the front of his top, but maybe he actually has that tattoo carry further than just his shoulder. And that's really interesting. There's something, of course, for your eye to hone in on, and it makes this figure what normally would be almost more of a bland design of a character. It makes Storm Shadow almost the more interesting of the two characters. What do you guys think of Storm Shadow? Let me know down below in the comment section. As of right now, I've got the figure displayed as sort of more the G.I. Joe version of Storm Shadow, with the hood over top of his head and, of course, the crossbow and stuff, the bow and arrow. But I think likely I'm going to be going back to the way he was at the beginning of the review, just with his face fully shown, and have maybe the hood piece, I'm glad to see that they included, have it tucked behind the back of his neck. But either way, though, what do you guys think of the figure line, and really of the two that we've now looked at, both Snake Eyes and now Storm Shadow? What do you think is the better looking figure? Let me know down below in the comment section. Also as well, I'd like to thank the folks over at Hiya Toys that did make this review possible, again by sending over the Snake Eyes we looked at earlier, and now looking at the Storm Shadow. A big thank you to Hiya Toys for sending this my way. If you guys enjoyed this video, want to hit with a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and certainly do want to stick around for more, if you haven't already done so, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. And of course, as always, if you haven't already done so, turn on the bell notification. That's your way to get those friendly reminders every single time the person behind the camera, that's me, is popping up new content here on this channel, with certainly a lot more to come. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.